The ACC has moved to a 9-game conference schedule. Let's go over what this means for Syracuse football. Well, first, let's dive into some of the logistics behind the ACC moving to a 9-game conference schedule. When is this going to kick in? Glad you asked. Based on what I'm reading, it sounds like it's going to be for 2027, but it could be for as soon as next year, 2026. And we'll go over it, exactly what this means for Syracuse in a moment. But regardless, it shouldn't be too much of a hassle, regardless of what year this kicks in for the ACC for Syracuse as far as their scheduling, which we'll detail very, very soon. Also, as part of the 9-game conference schedule, the ACC is requiring every ACC team to play one additional game against a Power 4 opponent, and I also believe, or Notre Dame. So a Power 4 opponent that includes Notre Dame as well, because Notre Dame, of course, is an independent program. We're going to go over this from a Syracuse angle, and the good news for you all, ladies and gentlemen, is you can actually check out future schedules for Syracuse football, fbschedules.com. So let's say the ACC future scheduling does in fact kick in for 2026. The good news is that Syracuse football is playing Notre Dame at home in 2026, which would satisfy the requirement of playing a Power 4 conference team or Notre Dame, because you are playing Notre Dame. However, I think Cuse would probably have to drop one of their other non-conference games that they have scheduled so far to accommodate for the fact that they are now going to need to add an extra ACC game. So the other non-conference games that they are playing in 2026 are New Hampshire, Toledo, or at UConn. My guess is that if Syracuse needs to drop a game, it would probably be Toledo or going on the road to face UConn. The reasoning behind that is because New Hampshire is an FCS opponent, and I'd imagine Syracuse wants to keep an FCS opponent on their schedule. So that's what happens if the future scheduling kicks in as soon as 2026, but most likely it'll kick in for 2027. The good news is that Syracuse football already has its Power 4 non-conference opponent scheduled. They're going on the road at Penn State that season, which I believe is scheduled for week 2 of 2027. The other non-conference game for Syracuse that year is, I believe, going on the road at UConn. So in theory, Syracuse football could just drop UConn in 2026 if need be, because they're going to UConn in 2027. Syracuse, of course, in 2027 still would need another ACC opponent, which I believe the ACC will take care of for them. And they would also need to add one more non-conference opponent to that schedule, given that their Power 4 team that they are playing that year is on the road against Penn State. I'd imagine that Syracuse football is going to look to add a cupcake to that schedule, probably an FCS opponent, which, my guess, honestly, I think that might be week 1. Syracuse football decides to add it because Penn State is scheduled for September 4th, which would be week 2. So who are you going to play in week 1? Well, you could just go with an FCS opponent, and that is your week 1 matchup right there in 2027. So the ACC moving to a 9-game conference slate with an additional game against a Power 4 opponent or Notre Dame. That is what it means for Syracuse football.